Hey guys, welcome to today's video where we're going to be discussing the Philadelphia Eagles offense and what to expect from them in 2020. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. And at the date of recording, the only person to opt out of the Eagles offense is Marquise Goodwin. So there may be some more players that end up opting out on the Eagles offense. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Just a heads up that at the date of recording, Goodwin is the only person to opt out. And on a quick side note, if you don't already know, I've been writing some articles for the updog.com, which is basically a sports article website where anyone under the age of 22 can post articles on any sports topic that they're interested in. If any of you are, interested in reading some of the articles on the website, feel free to go check those out. I'll leave a link to them in the description down below. There are some really interesting articles up, and we're coming out with new content daily. Secondly, if any of you are under the age of 22 and are interested in doing some sports writing, then you can sign up on the updog.com immediately. By the way, it's free and you can write as much or as little as you want. The only requirements are that you're under 22 and are interested in sports writing. If this is something that even partially interests you, why not give it a shot? It's a good thing to put on a resume, and once again, you can write as much or as little as you want. I'll leave the link in the description down below for those that are interested. Now let's dive right into the video, and I hope you enjoy. So before we get started on talking about the Eagles offense in 2020, let's talk about what they did in 2019. So they were 14th in total yards, 11th in passing yards, 11th in rushing yards, 12th in points, and 20th in turnovers. Last season, the Eagles had 0 wide receivers who had at least 50 catches or 500 receiving yards. And that was because basically all their wide receivers ended up going down with injury. All their big catch guys were tight ends in Zach Ertz or Dallas Goedert or Miles Sanders at running back. And it makes sense that 12 personnel, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and 1 running back is the Eagles' most common personnel grouping at 52% of the time, because they've got 2 really skilled tight ends that are basically their wide receivers, and they've got one of the better running backs in the NFL, Miles Sanders. Philadelphia had a clear offseason goal of adding speed and athleticism all over the roster, and you can really see that on offense. They brought in a lot of speed this offseason at wide receiver position especially, which kind of copies what the Chiefs did. They brought in Jalen Reagor in the draft, as well as some other later round draft picks at the wide receiver position like Quez Watkins to add more speed. Doug Pederson is an Andy Reid disciple, and he knows the power of speed at the receiver position, and he knows what it opens up. They still have DeSean Jackson, and this offense could be very, very fast. They also brought on Scandirello as the senior offensive assistant in Philadelphia, who was with the Broncos as an offensive coordinator last season. He's had experience working with Kyle Shanahan, and he's supposedly good at syncing the run game and passing game together through play action. So with him with the Eagles, look for the Eagles to run a lot of bootlegs, a lot of play action, and look for Scandirello to really help Carson Wentz get out of the pocket, be able to get out of the pocket, and be successful out of the pocket, making throws downfield. They're going to really try and get Carson Wentz in motion, full defenses, and look for the play action to be something that the Eagles emphasize moving forward. Now, though, let's move on to the players on this offense. Let's start with the quarterback in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is a former Pro Bowler, and last season he almost single-handedly dragged the Eagles to the playoffs. So in 16 games last year, which is a good sign, you want to see him playing all 16 games. He has had a little bit of an injury history before. He threw for over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. That was probably his best season since his 2017 Pro Bowl season. But nonetheless, Wentz is one of the better quarterbacks in the game. Arguably, he's a top 10 quarterback. Some people will have him higher than that. Some people will have him just a little bit lower than that. I personally don't know where. I'd probably have him as a fringe top 10 quarterback, maybe around 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. But overall, he's a great quarterback, great leader, good locker room guy. And I mean, he was fantastic. Last year when the Eagles basically lost all their wide receivers, he was able to produce when none of his wide receivers had 50 catches or 500 receiving yards. Like, he literally pulled a Russell Wilson and put his team on his back and carried them to the playoffs. Like, Carson Wentz is legit. He is the franchise quarterback for this Philadelphia Eagles team, and he's going to be there for the long run. So watch out for Carson Wentz moving into 2020. Basically, anything that he's able to do is going to translate into success for the Eagles. He's the heart, soul, and core of this Eagles offense. And if he's not on this game, then I don't care who they brought in on offense this offseason and what they did offensively and what they did schematically was. If Carson Wentz isn't on his game, then I don't see this Eagles team getting to the playoffs. Now, though, let's move to the running game, where this offseason they ended up losing Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard last season for the Eagles only played in 10 games, and in those 10 games, he had 525 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He's not a great running back, but it's still a loss for them. I mean, he's a good power running back, good goal line running back, and those touches will end up going to Miles Sanders, who was the RB1 for the Eagles last year. Poor Sanders last year, in 16 games, he had 818 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. As I said, probably those goal line carries, probably just overall more carries will be going to Miles Sanders, and therefore look for Sanders to probably get to 1,000 yards this year, probably 5 or 6 touchdowns. And the thing with Miles Sanders is he's a good receiving back. As I said, he was one of the players on this Eagles offense that had 50 catches and over 500 yards, and he had 50 receptions and 509 receiving yards. Plus, he had 3 receiving touchdowns. So overall, good receiving back, good running back, and overall, he's going to be a staple of this offense moving forward. They've also got Boston Scott to back him up. Scott is an average backup running back. I mean, he's not bad. He's not good. In 11 games last year, he had 245 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. But look at something else. He's probably more of a threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He had 24 catches and 204 receiving yards. But overall, he can be a goal line running back too. He's a little bit of an undersized guy, but overall, he's strong, physical, and as a backup running back to Miles Sanders, I like this running back group. Now, though, let's move to the wide receivers, where this offseason they lost Nelson Aguilar. I know that Eagles fans are probably happy that they lost Nelson Aguilar. This man apparently couldn't catch, right? Had brick hands, whatever. Anyway, in 2019, in 11 games, he started 10 games. He had 39 catches for 363 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. The really annoying thing with Nelson Aguilar is that he was taken in the first round back in 2015, and he was supposed to be a solid wide receiver. Ended up kind of capping out at 768 receiving yards in 2017, where he had his best season and 8 receiving touchdowns. But overall, Aguilar couldn't step up when all those wide receivers went down with injury, and he ended up missing time too. But at the end of the day, they did bring some new wide receivers in this offseason, and at least DeSean Jackson is back and healthy this season. 3-time Pro Bowler, and although there was an incident with him this offseason on social media, we're going to blow by that. In 2019 with Philadelphia, with his first season back in Philadelphia since 2013, where he made the Pro Bowl, Jackson only played in 3 games, had 9 catches on 10 targets. That's a pretty good catch rate. And he had 159 receiving yards. Jackson is a speed guy. He's a deep threat. And he had 17.7 average yards per reception. He also had 2 receiving touchdowns. And I don't think Jackson is as good as he used to be in Philadelphia, or even, I guess, at times in Washington, too. He was pretty solid. But overall, DeSean Jackson's still a deep threat, still a speed guy, and he's still a guy who can stretch the field. They also do have Alshon Jeffery. The thing with Alshon Jeffery is he currently is injured, and we don't really know when he'll be back. I believe it's a foot injury. Yeah, it's an injury to his left foot, and he may not be ready for the beginning of the season. Anyway, he's a former Pro Bowler, former Super Bowl champion with the Eagles, and overall, he's a really good player. Like, people don't realize that. Alshon Jeffery, for some reason, people just think that he fell off the map. He still has it. In 10 games last year, he had 43 catches for 490 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Jeffery is one of the best wide receivers at the point of attack. He's really good at going up and catching the football. He's good in the red zone, and he's a big play, big target guy who's going to be an important player in this wide receiving corps when he's able to get back to the field. In 2018 with Philadelphia, I think those are more stats that are like him. I mean, in 13 games, he had 843 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. If he played all 16 games that year, 1,000 receiving yards and 8 receiving touchdowns was probably likely. He's also played in Chicago earlier in his career, and moving into his 9th overall season and 4th with Philadelphia, I'm excited to see how he's able to get back to the field, and especially age 30, it will be interesting to see how much production he's left in the tank. They also brought in Jalen Reagor in the draft out of TCU. Reagor is an interesting player. So at 21, where the Eagles were picking, Justin Jefferson was still available, and a lot of Eagles fans thought that they would go with Justin Jefferson. Nonetheless, they picked Reagor, and Reagor in 12 games last year had 43 catches for 611 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. Those stats don't sound great, and to be honest, they really aren't. The thing is, Reagor has a lot of measurables that are really good. Is this another Nelson Aguilar situation? I hope not, and for Eagles fans, they better hope not. But at the end of the day, Reagor has great speed, even though he ran a pretty slow 40 time. I think he was in the high 4.4s, where a guy like Justin Jefferson ran in the low 4.4s. But he's still faster than he looks. I mean, he's fat. He's really fast on tape. He has rare speed and explosiveness. He's able to stretch the field. All these wide receivers are basically able to stretch the field. And he's able to make plays in open space. He's a good yards after catch kind of guy. And although he's not a great route runner, he's a good route runner. So look for Jalen Reagor to be that guy that the Eagles really hope he will become. It'll be interesting because in this draft, there were a ton of wide receivers. And let's see if Jalen Reagor is really better than guys like Denzel Mims or Justin Jefferson or Brandon Ayuk. Now, though, let's move on to J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, interesting player. So last season, he was thrust into a bigger role because he played in 16 games, didn't end up getting injured. And at the end of the day, he only had 10 catches for 169 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. So at the end of the day, though, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was picked up in the second round back in 2019. That was his first season. He may have not been 100% ready for the way the NFL is played. And although I'm kind of making excuses for him as the fourth wide receiver, is he terrible? No. Is he great? No. But if Alshon Jeffery ends up missing some time at the beginning of the season, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is going to see some increased playing time. I think he'll be able to get better in his second season. I mean, he's 6'2", 225 pounds, and although that doesn't really match the Alshon Jeffery kind of height and weight, I mean, Jeffery's 6'3", 218, kind of similar, or not exactly similar. I think Alshon Jeffery is just a better overall player. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is going to have some shoes to fill. Overall, though, as a fourth wide receiver, he was there in Philadelphia last season, but he's going to need to really improve and see an increase in production next year if he wants to stay with Philadelphia for a while. Now, though, let's move to the tight ends, which are a staple of this offense. As I said, the tight end position, led by Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, is a real point of emphasis for this Eagles team. They like to play a lot of 12 personnel. That's 2 tight end looks because they've got 2 of the NFL's better tight ends. Ertz is a top 3 tight end, and Goddard's probably a top 15 tight end. And if Goedert actually was playing all the time and was a starter, then he'd probably be a top 10 tight end. So they've got a lot of talent at the tight end position. Let's start with Zach Ertz, though. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler and former Super Bowl champion. Came up very clutch in that Super Bowl against the Patriots, but in 2019, he was a Pro Bowler for the 3rd consecutive year in a row. He had 88 catches for 916 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns in 15 games. In 2018, he had 116 catches for over 1,100 yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. Big touchdown guy, big yards after the catch guy, big target, and he's one of Carson Wentz's favorite targets in the passing game. So look out for Zach Ertz. He is an elite tight end in the NFL, and he's up there with guys like George Kittle as well as Travis Kelce. He's probably a little bit below those two, but overall, he's better than everyone else. Ertz is great, and overall, I think he's going to be one of the most important and one of the most trusted targets in the passing game and aerial attack for Carson Wentz in 2020. They've also got Dallas Goedert, who's one of the most underrated tight ends in the NFL. By no means is Dallas Goedert just your average no-name player. Goedert is a really good tight end. I mean, in 15 games last year with Ertz on the roster too. Just remember that. He had 58 catches for 607 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. He's a big touchdown guy. He's had 9 receiving touchdowns in 2 years. And the former second-round pick is going to need to continue to improve moving forward. He's got a good frame, good size, and he's playing alongside one of the better tight ends in the NFL, so he's going to be open. I mean, he's 6'5", 256 pounds, and he's a good run blocker too. That's something that's underrated about Dallas Goedert. So overall, I like these tight ends, and I think this tight end room is going to be a focal point for this offense moving forward. Look for the tight ends to be utilized a lot in the passing game, and look for 12 personnel to continue to be the most common personnel grouping for Doug Pederson. Now, though, let's move on to the offensive line. This offseason, they did lose a few players on the offensive line. We're going to start with Vitae, Big V. He ended up going to the Detroit Lions, and although he only played 476 snaps last year, gave up 2 sacks, had 4 penalties, and had a 72.8 PFF player grade, he's still a solid player. I mean, he's going to be a loss, and he was a depth player. He could play a little bit, and although he's going to be a starter now in Detroit, it's still a loss for the Eagles. They also lost Brandon Brooks to a season-ending injury. That is huge. Brooks was probably the second-best right guard in the NFL besides Zach Martin, and I know Eagles fans will hate for me to say that, but that's probably the case. Brooks is definitely an elite right guard, don't get me wrong, but losing him for an entire season is going to be really bad. That hurts Miles Sanders, that hurts Carson Wentz, that hurts the entire offense. Brooks was probably the best offensive lineman on this offense, and it's going to hurt. He's a former 3-time Pro Bowler, and in 2019 he made the Pro Bowl. In 16 games last season, he played over 1,000 snaps, only gave up 2 penalties and 1 sack, while earning a 92.9 PFF player grade. 92.9 is super high. Anytime you're over a 90 on a PFF player grade, you know that player is elite. So watch out for Brandon Brooks. Is going to be a really big loss moving forward, but at least the rest of the offensive line is still going to be one of the better offensive lines in the NFL.
So you may have just realized that my face cam went out, and that's because at the date of recording, what actually ended up happening is that Andre Dillard was scheduled to play, but turns out that he actually had a season-ending injury. So at left tackle is probably going to be Jason Peters, and Jason Peters has been with the team for a while. He re-signed with the team this offseason to stay in Philadelphia for another season, and Peters has played left tackle his entire career. He was originally going to play right guard for the team, and that would have allowed Andre Dillard to play left tackle. But now if Peters slots over to left tackle, That will be a fine transition for the Eagles, nothing out of the ordinary. And at right guard, it's probably going to be Matt Pryor, who will end up filling Brandon Brooks' place. Pryor only played 79 snaps last year. He's young. He was drafted back in 2018 in the 6th round, 206th overall. And overall, having Pryor on that offensive line is definitely not the greatest thing for the Eagles' offensive line, but at least they get a star in Jason Peters, a left tackle who can still play.
At left guard, they've got Isaac Seumalo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So Seumalo is a good left guard in the league. He played in 16 games last year. He's healthy. He's durable. And overall, he's not bad for this run game, and he's not bad for this offensive line. In 2019, he earned a 69.6 PFF player grade, and he played over 1,000 snaps, but his penalties and sacks were a little bit questionable at the left guard position. He gave up 5 penalties, and he gave up 5 sacks, which is a little bit brutal. But overall, still a good left guard, still a good guard, and with the guy next to him and Jason Kelce, I think Seumalo is still going to be a good run blocker for this team. Let's move on to Jason Kelce now. He's one of the better centers in the NFL. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro member, and he won the Super Bowl with the Eagles. So in 2019, he was a first-team All-Pro member and a Pro Bowler, and in 16 games, he was fantastic. I believe his PFF grade was over 80. I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was an 81.0. Really, really good. He had 1,163 snaps played. That was the most at the center position. He had 3 penalties given up and 2 sacks allowed. I would like to see those penalties and sacks diminish, especially as a center. But, I mean, Jason Kelce is getting up there in age. He's on the older side of 30, I believe, at this point in his career. And he's still one of the better centers in the NFL, but at the end of the day, he's still going to need to play like one of the better centers of the NFL moving forward. If he can continue to play like he played in 2019, then this offensive line is going to be good. Nonetheless, the Eagles still have one of the better right tackles in the NFL, Lane Johnson. 6'6", 317 pounds, 3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro member, and last year he made a Pro Bowl. In 12 games last year, he did miss a little bit of time. He missed 4 games, but overall, Lane Johnson is a really, really good right tackle. He played 759 snaps, gave up 5 penalties and 1 sack, and earned an 88.8 PFF player grade. Anytime you start to see that blue ranking on PFF, you know that player is good, and Lane Johnson has that. So overall, Lane Johnson is going to be one of the stars of this offensive line, and so is Jason Kelce. Isaac Seumalo is an above-average player. Overall, this offensive line is solid, and it's definitely above average. This Eagles offense is going to be good moving forward. Last year, as I said, they were 14th in total yards, 11th in passing yards, 11th in rushing yards, 12th in points, and 20th in turnovers. That is above average for an offense, but it's not top 10. I think next year with Doug Pederson, they really want to move into the top 10. They really want to establish themselves as one of the NFL's premier offenses, and they added a lot of speed with Jalen Reagor as well as some of the other wide receivers they added, like Quez Watkins in the later rounds. And they added a lot of athleticism, and overall, I really like what this team is going to be able to do moving forward. Although Marquise Goodwin is opting out of the season, that does get rid of a deep threat for them. But at the end of the day, I still really like where this Eagles team is at. I think they're in a good spot, and they improved defensively too, although they did lose some pieces. I like this offense moving forward. I think this has the potential to be a top 10 offense. And I think for Eagles fans, this is going to be an exciting season. Overall, I think some of the coaching moves, like bringing Rich Scandirello, is going to be really interesting as a senior offensive assistant. He should help out that play-action game, that running game, and that passing game, and I think he's going to help Doug Pederson too. Overall, I like this offense moving forward, and I think they have a shot at winning the division. To me, I do think the Dallas Cowboys probably have a better team, but every year the Dallas Cowboys choke, and they never end up doing as well as anyone says, so the Eagles have a legitimate shot. Anyway, I think the Eagles are a wildcard team nonetheless, if not a division winner, and especially in a 17 playoff, I think that the Eagles are almost certainly going to make it, as long as they don't absolutely blow things up. Anyway, if the Eagles are able to stay healthy moving forward, watch out for this Eagles offense, and also watch out for that improved Eagles defense. Although they did lose some pieces, I still like what they did on defense, bringing in Darius Slay and Javon Hargrave. Overall, though, watch out for this Eagles team moving forward, and watch for them to make some noise in the NFC East.
Now that you've reached the end of my video, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it helps my channel out, and check out my other videos on my channel. Also, you can follow my Instagram, the link is in the description down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, see ya.